Hello there. We are very
Hey,
excited today. Hi. We have a guest coming to us from Sacramento, a fellow West Coaster here, and we're introducing Monica Hall, who has a big story to tell. Welcome.
Hi, Monica. Thanks for being here.
my pleasure. It's great to be here. It's good to meet you guys almost in person.
I
nice.
know.
At least I see a face. It's great.
The new norm, right?
The new norm. It is nice to meet you. You're funny.
At least we do have video. Like, just imagine if it were 15 years ago, we wouldn't have this option. So
yeah, it's nice to see each other.
Yeah.
Well, so Diggin, you have a layered story, and we'll find out why. Mm-hmm.
I have a layered story, and it's, I'm an adoptee. I was born in, do I even want to say when I was born? Probably not, but I was born a long time ago. And so I was.
Are you a BSC?
What's that?
Baby scoop era?
Yeah, it's actually, I was born in Canada. So it was a little different in Canada. It was called the baby scoop, but they took Indigenous children out of the homes and out of the arms of Indigenous women and put them in non-Indigenous families. And that was my experience. And I didn't know that I was Indigenous, and I bleached my hair, but my older pictures and on my website, you can see that I looked a little bit like Cher back in the 70s. So I was born in 1957 in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I was relinquished for adoption by my mother. And I was in a foster home for 4 months, I believe. And what's really interesting is I did find my biological family before the advent of internet. It was like in 1980. And I have a search binder, which I was looking for, I can't find, but the search binder, I was just going through it. And all this time I thought I was in a foster home with 6 other babies. There were 10 babies there. It was, I don't know if I was there for display purposes, where I was before that, but my mom in the notes, keep notes from decades ago. And I saw that the mother, the woman that was the nurse that had the babies, there was a baby boy that was sickly and he was not expected to live. So that's where I was. Yeah. And so
sickly due to
I don't
the
know.
environment that he was in, or
maybe he was born with something that he wasn't going to live. And so she was caring for him till he passed, with 9 other babies.
9 other babies.
Newborns. Yeah.
Everyone's getting a lot of attention there.
Yeah. Right. So I don't know what happened or what kind of attention I did or didn't have, but my parents said that when they adopted me, I was really happy. I was happy baby.
And so you were adopted into a white family?
Correct. So my parents were Californians that were living in Alaska. And so they took me to Alaska, which, I was born in Canada. And I was told bedtime stories, how I was special, that my mother loved me so much that she wanted me to have a mommy and a daddy. And so I grew up with that narrative of thinking I was special because I was picked. Of course, I had extremely low self-worth and self-esteem. But so then we got my brother. So we got my brother when I was 3. And that's when everything changed for me. And I have 2 little dogs. One's my daughter's that I was supposed to just have until her son stopped colicking. And now my grandson's 7. So I have 2 dogs. And the other little dog is like a little narcissist dog. Like he's a little bee, and he's mean and picks on the other dog. So he's smaller because he's jealous. And that dog annoys me. And it's because I spot it, because that's the way I was with my little brother. I was just angry that he took away my mommy, and he was really sensitive.
Was he also Indigenous?
No. And he looked like a gangly alien child when they got him. They said that he was a really good baby because he was sleeping through the night, and he was starving to death, and he had super sensitive, had allergies, food allergies, screamed a lot, and took away my mommy.
And were you in Alaska at this point, or
Yes,
California?
yeah,
Okay.
Alaska. Yeah, that's where I grew up. I didn't move out of Alaska until I was 16. So those are my formative years. That's all I really know. And so
And you were told you were adopted?
I was told as a bedtime story that I was picked out, that I was special, that my other mother loved me so much. She wanted me to have a mommy and a daddy, and that she was selfless.
Mm.
So my brother came along, and my dad swooped in, and he was my savior. He saw the little narcissist in me, and, because I'm an extrovert, I was a tomboy. I did everything, to the, like, I beat all the boys at park strip races. I was, extroverted, and my brother was different. And my father was jealous of my brother. And so he became my savior. He's the one that I felt special with. Unfortunately, he was also a pedophile. So that wasn't, and see.
Holy smokes.
What the hell, right?
What the hell? Monica, sorry.
Oh my God.
He molested any other kids, but so anyway, but I love my dad. And it's really conflicting and confusing for an adoptee, because
of course,
somewhere to belong, someone to love us. We don't want to be left. We don't want to be abandoned. And so my dad was everything to me, yet I had so many repressed memories from my childhood. And part of my memoir, my daughter wanted me to start writing a memoir because it was so interesting, because I was an adoptee and also a birth mother in reunion on both ends. And she thought, well, that's super interesting to people, right? Well, to me, it's not it. It's my life. There's no, the stuff that was interesting was the things that I repressed. Like, I knew I had reoccurring dreams and missing time and repressed memories, and I knew all these things, and those were the things that I wanted to figure out. But this memoir is mainly about adoption. It's not about my dad in that way. That's my second book, where I figured a lot of that out. But this is about adoption, because you just can't have too many threads. And the adoption part. So when I was 13, there was something that clicked, like something changed. And I for many, many decades, I didn't know what changed other than just I changed. So I became this juvenile delinquent. I beat people up. I broke into houses. I stole cars. I vandalized. I was a bully, and I was 103 pounds, 5'1" 3/4, and just angry, just really angry. And
not to interrupt, but when did the situation start with your father? Had it already been going on?
I think because I've done a lot of work and some EMDR in 2020. In fact, I went through EMDR with 11 big T traumas. This is what the therapist called it. You have 11 big T traumas, 11 big T traumas. And it took
not little T, by the way.
Yeah, big T. And so I took the better part of a year to even just go through the treatment planning session for that. And I wanted to remember something about, now I knew, because in the 90s, I'd gone through the workbook, The Courage to Heal for Men and Women Survivors of Child Sexual Abuse, because I knew something had happened, and something had happened to my daughter, and it brought that up when I was in therapy. And I started remembering things and realizing weird things I always thought were normal, weren't normal with me. Like getting under the covers with the drapes drawn for a nap during the day was filthy, disgusting, like something was horribly wrong. And I didn't even realize that until I was, my daughter was 5 or 6. And, she was going through therapy, and I'm like, wow, that's not normal. I wonder why. So that's when I went through the workbook. I had enough there to know that I had been abused. So I worked through that in 91, 92, 93, 94. And then, of course things they come up again. And so in 2020, when I was writing my memoir, I didn't want to write this about my dad because I loved him and I didn't want to throw him under the bus.
Are your parents still alive?
So I didn't want to throw him under the bus unless I really remembered. So I got definitely enough memory from that EMDR. My father passed away when I was 19. So in Alaska, this juvenile delinquent behavior, yet I was sneaking out my bedroom window. And I think the whole thing is I just wanted to be loved. I wasn't good in school. I had problems with maybe learning, ADHD, ADD. My frontal lobe would shut down and I get fearful that I couldn't do the math. And my parents were very smart. And they would get frustrated with me and push away from the desk. Do you help her? You know, that kind of thing. So I stopped bringing work home, and then I cheated all through school. Had I have known that I was going to end up manufacturing and being a chemist,
I know, products, that's crazy.
Algebra could have helped me so much of those formulas. So chemistry. And now I'm a writer. You'd think English would have been a really good thing to pay attention to. So but anyway, I felt really stupid. I felt like I wasn't smart. And that was a huge thing for me. And I never went to college because I knew I had no discipline. So at 13, I had an incident with my dad where he took me out in a car when he thought some boys in the neighborhood wanted to ball me, which was the term in Alaska. Well, back in this is 70, like 1970.
Dear Lord.
And so that term, I laugh when I hear kids saying it because I knew it was sexy and I didn't want to, you know, appear stupid.
Not cool.
You know. And so I didn't really know what it meant. And we were Catholic, like super Catholic. We went to every holy day. I was named after the Virgin Mary. My name's Mary Monica. We very, very Catholic family. And my father used to say things to my brother and I when we were kids, like, Mama's a saint. I couldn't even get her in the sack until we were married. You know,
oh my God.
My dad was really inappropriate.
Nice research on the part of the social workers for placement of an adoptive baby. Jesus.
Never have passed a psych eval or a background check.
Oh my God.
They
just didn't do those things in those days.
No, they didn't. So I had this complex of I would be good if I was a virgin.
The message.
So I was the badass virgin Monica Hall in Anchorage. And I write on my blog and essays, and I have people from Alaska that email me or write me or message me like, yeah, you chased me home from the movie theater. I was so scared of you. Or you beat up my boyfriend. Or just horrific things that I did. And many of them I don't remember. I was just too busy trying to feel like somebody. I didn't feel good with the smart kids. I didn't do well in school. So I sought lower companions because I felt like I wouldn't be judged there and that I could be somebody, you know. So that happened when I was around 13 and some other things. There was a very vicious wire hanger beating, and my mother made my dad stop when she saw pleasure in his eyes. She told me. But my mom didn't intervene, you know, and I love my mom so much, but she was my mom, but she was there for my brother, who now lives with me because he never moved out of her house. She died in 2019. And he was still living there and never really launched. You know?
And now you're in charge of that.
Yeah, but it's good now. I mean, I was super resentful when he first moved in. I basically, he'd never gone to DMV on his own. He'd never paid a bill. He didn't know how to do anything. And I didn't do it. I'm like, that's the way to build self-esteem, is do esteemable things. Do things for yourself, build self-esteem, figure it out on your own.
It's sad that's taken away from him to grow.
Boy, the parenting sounds horrendous.
Horrible dysfunction in my family. And my mom made him her husband when my dad died in 1976.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. She transferred that whole feeling. Yeah. Gross.
And so
poor guy, man.
I'm 21 and with a guy, and then we eventually married. I wasn't in love with him. I just wanted to get the hell out of the house. And so we had a business together, and at 1980, I started searching for my biological family. So I'm going to leave it there for a moment, and I'm going to go back. So when I was this juvenile delinquent, I would sneak out my bedroom window, take LSD, drugs, cross tops, reds. I loved LSD. I mean, I'm clean and sober today, like 39 years. So
but you loved it.
So
many adoptees have substance abuse issues.
Yeah.
We are hugely overrepresented. I myself am one.
Yes, we are. So but back then I hadn't drank yet. But it was the LSD. I just loved. I think it removed the ego, and I think that's what I loved. It was going back to maybe God, or in touch with something else. You know, it was. I loved it. Never had a bad trip. Took a ton of LSD, but I snuck out my bedroom window. My best friend had her big brothers. Now, this is Alaska in the 70s. So I'm going to set the stage here. Alaska was an oil boom town. Mm-hmm. So you had pipeline executives moving in. You had new banks. My junior high was on a double shift. They were building another school. My high school was on a double shift. You had 2 bases, an Army and an Air Force base, and you had all these pipeline workers. So you had.
Was this Anchorage? Anchorage?
Alaska. In 68, they discovered oil. 70s is when they were ramping up.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this wasn't normal, where new people were moving into town and such. And sex workers, like so much prostitution. There was a massage parlor, which is what they called them, popping up on almost every corner. It was really insane.
That'd make a good TV show, Anchorage in the 70s.
Yeah, totally.
Interesting.
And a screenplay. So yeah, probably, because it was, there are things that aren't in this manuscript that are in the next one, things that happened to me there, because I couldn't put it all in with the themes of adoption, which is heavy enough, and sexual abuse, which is heavy enough. But I snuck out my bedroom window because my best friend, her big brothers were part of a crew, and they were 19 at the time. You know, I knew them when they were, 2 years earlier, but I was 15. And one of the crew, I'd snuck out my window, and he saw me, I think, high on reds. I think that's why. And we were coming back from a concert, and you know how it's like kind of feeling like you're drunk on reds. And I was I was super cute,
What are reds? I don't know what that is.
Downers make you feel feel drunk.
Ludes. Yeah. Like,
they were like Quaaludes, sort of.
Okay. Quaaludes.
But they weren't, they were reds. But anyway, they make you feel drunk, and you just like, so, and I'd only taken them that one time, but he talked me into sneaking out my bedroom window and going out with him on a date. And I mean, he looked a bit like Manson, with the dark beard and the dark hair, and the boys I liked were baby faced, and, they were in high school,
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to go out with him, but he knew I snuck out my window, and, the things that he did to get me to sneak out. So I brought my girlfriend along, and he was angry when she was there, and took her to her brother's, and I waited for him on the lawn and went on a motorcycle ride and got raped. And so I was a virgin and 15, and I got raped, and never told anybody. I felt like it was my fault. And if my parents knew, they would have made a huge stink. And my mom was overprotective. That's why I was sneaking out. I'm a free spirit. I'm still a free spirit. I don't want to be contained, right? So anyway, I got pregnant. And my parents being very Catholic, there was never a discussion of what was going to happen. There was no discussion. You just give your baby away when you're a Catholic, and adoption's normalized in your family. That's what you do. There was never, like, my editor kept saying, show a scene where there was a conversation about you relinquishing your baby.
You're like,
there
no.
was none. There was never a scene. It was just,
you never had a choice. There was no choice.
And it was like, break an arm, get a cast. And this was in the 70s. This is when pregnant girls weren't allowed in school. Very Catholic family. My parents were older. So when I was adopted, my mom was 32 and my dad was 42. So they were older too. They lived through the Depression. They had those old ideals and the virgin thing. And so I got shut away for 6 months during a dark winter. In Alaska, it's dark for like 6 months or longer. The longest day in the winter, the shortest day is 5 hours
of light.
Yeah. So it's really dark, and we hunker down, but nobody really came to visit. All my friends kind of abandoned me because I wasn't fun anymore, and they were kids. What are you going to do? And I was my sophomore year. So I had, right in the early part of my sophomore year as well, I had gone to a party. My parents didn't know where I was, and I got abducted at knife point. And I now know what was going to happen to me because I investigated it, and that's in my second book. But suffice it to say, I didn't realize until recently that I was pregnant.
Then,
and what would have happened to me is when they found out I was pregnant, they would have waited till I was showing, kicked me in the gut until I lost the baby, and put me back out to work. So there's a series of like mini miracles in my life over and over and over again. I wasn't meant for this. I was born, and this is what I believe, I was born strong. Because most people with 11 big T traumas, especially those sensitive types peoples, they would have killed themselves long ago. And I have this ability just to push it down, repress it to move on. And so these last 7 years of writing have been really hard because I worked with a developmental editor. I'd send her part of it, and then she'd say, so why did you feel shame? I'm like, I don't know. I just always felt shame. I never thought about why. And so I had to dig all that out, which has been, I don't recommend it. Like I work with a lot of people in recovery as well. And we have great stories, like people in recovery, like our stories would horrify most people. Like that we're laughing about it because we've lived it and we've moved past it. But so that was really helpful to me to be able to dig and be honest. So super honest in the book and super honest in everything I say. Did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to, you jumped from when your parents sent you away and you were pregnant. I kind of wanted that. Hear the rest of that.
Yeah, I'm going to go back. They locked me in the house, and my friends didn't show up. And
did they also, like, were you not allowed to go out just also for embarrassment of the family?
Right. I would get in the car through the garage, and then she'd take me out of town to church, or I went to see a nun for counseling. And so this lady was Sister Mary Claire. She was lovely. I loved her, but a part of me knew that she meant to take my baby away. So it was like, I loved her and she loved me, yet she was going to take my baby and give it to people that were better than me.
Yeah. And that's the message.
Super conflicting, And so I did, that's a whole story in of itself. And we don't have time here for that, but I did. I left my baby at the hospital, and being an adoptee, she was the only human on the planet that was part of me.
Yeah.
So I groomed that nun. I'm in sales, and I groomed that nun to let me see my baby. They did not let Catholics see babies back there. The other hospital, where I went to a pregnant girls' school during the week, and those girls all were going to relinquish. None of them did. And they weren't.
Those girls all kept their babies? How did they? Well, that's a different story. That's not your story.
I mean, their moms let them. Or they ended up living with the baby daddy, or got married, or one got an abortion, but none of them relinquished, and they were all going to. I was the only one. And so I told the nun that I needed to see my baby. And so they let me. I had to walk. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was housed at the other end of the ward, away from the other mothers who got to feed and hold their babies.
Right.
And I had torn internally and externally, just horrible. She was 8.5 pounds, and I couldn't even sit, but I could scoot, like tiny little scoots across the floor. And the next day I got to see her. The nun took me to her, and I got to hold her and count her toes and smell her and look for similarities. She had little Cupid bow lips like I did. She had a long second toe like I did, and she had a weird little extra ridge in her ear. And I mean, I got to see her a few times, but it would like the nurse would come and take her from me. Like she was, like I was visiting, you know, an inmate or something, you know, my time was expired.
Yeah.
And I remember being pissed. Like, I haven't signed the papers yet. How dare you? But I had no voice. You know, I was this juvenile delinquent, but when it came to those things, I had no voice. In my family, if you had a voice, you got slapped, you got hit, you got raged at. So, you know, it's a really weird dynamic. But I do, when I left the hospital, I looked back over my shoulder and I'm in the car with my mom, and the grief was, it was imploding. You know, it was like I was going to die from the pain of her. It was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. And I remember looking back the hospital, and what, you know, is horrifying. Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I just said, I just won't think about it right now. I just won't think about it right now. I just won't think about it right now. And that was my mantra. So I went home, and I just, well, and she would bubble up, and I remember her, and I'd see that, I'd repress it. I just won't think about it right now. I just won't think about it right now. And I never cried. I had some idea that if I cried, I'd die. Yeah. You know, like I would never stop, and I had to be strong, or I couldn't go through with it. And at the end, it was like, I never had a voice like, I want to keep my baby, or can I keep my baby? And I remember thinking, if I don't, because at the last minute, this is so brutal. And for years, I couldn't see my mom's culpability in anything, because I loved her so much, and I just wanted her to love me back, you know. And she had all the love for my brother, and I didn't realize it was jealousy there, because my dad favored me, and I think she knew what was happening. And, it stopped when I was probably 6. There was an episode where I remember wetting the bed, and I got a phobia of vomiting, and I know that's probably when it stopped. But she was so nice to me when I was pregnant. She was like my best friend. And now I realize, when I got pregnant, you know, 9 years later with my daughter, who's 38 now, before, you know, when you'd see attractive women in town or whatever around or whatever, they, you know, never really talked to you and kind of sneer back when you were young, not now, but when I was young. But when I was pregnant, everybody was nice to me. Pretty women that would normally snub me, old men, young men, everybody was nice to me when I was pregnant. And I realized I was no longer competition. And my mom was so sweet to me when I was pregnant. But prior to that, it was, you know, it wasn't like, I just thought she didn't like me. And I didn't realize it was jealousy. We were fraught with jealousy. I was jealous of my brother. My dad picked on my brother, who never said a kind word to him, picked on him 24/7. He was jealous of my brother. My mother was jealous of me. It was such a sick place to grow up.
Sure is.
So you get out. Do you finally get out? So you give your daughter up. You get to visit her a couple times.
Right at the end, when I'm supposed to sign the papers, my the nun came in, a different nun, because this nun had been sent to the lower 48, the one that was going to bring my baby. And the nun came in. She said, I go, where's Mama? Why isn't Mama here? And she said she couldn't come. She needed me to tell you something. She said that she wouldn't be able to get the words out. And she'd get too emotional, but she wants you to know she couldn't live with herself if she was to separate a mother from her child. And if you want to bring your baby home, you can. And then she picked up the papers that I was supposed to read, that I couldn't read, for the signing an hour later, and took them and left. No conversation about how that might look, that I go to school, my mom would take my baby, we'd go out and get diapers, just nothing. And so I sat there with, all of a sudden I've been groomed to give my baby away. And now I have this decision that I could bring her home.
Yeah.
And I
and your mom's not there to tell you this, to talk to you about it. It's just, you're a kid.
She threw me under the bus so she wouldn't feel guilt.
So you signed the papers.
I signed the papers. And I signed the papers because, oh my gosh, Sister Claire would would, not love me anymore. The parents that she told me are her wonderful parents, they would be devastated because even the adoptive mother had given Sister Claire a message to give to my mother that I told my mom I was supposed to go over a bumpy road, so I'd hurry up and go into labor. And I went a month overdue. And I think my baby just didn't want to leave. And I didn't want her to leave, And so I out of insecurity and out of, my birth mother was good. She did the right thing. She was selfless. And here I had no worth. I was worthless. I was relinquished. I was given away, and I always felt worthless. And I would be worthy if I did what my mother did and gave my baby away. Yeah. I would get the worth back. I don't know. It's so hard to unwind, but I signed the paper.
So complicated and layered in there for you.
So complicated.
I'm sorry what you've been through.
And thank you. And I, it's still emotional. So I left my daughter and just repressed. And all through my 6 months at home in the dark, when I was kept in the house, I kept a journal. And I wrote mostly very immature. Gosh, I was just a child, but I did keep that journal and document it. And all these years, I have kept every appointment book, every journal. I have a diary as early as 1968 when I was just like 11, and all my appointment books from all these years. And I'm like, why am I carting this crap around? And I think I intuitively knew I was going to need to scribe this and figure it out eventually. So we moved shortly thereafter to the lower 48. We moved to Fair Oaks, which is where I live now. And I
Sacramento.
started, Sacramento area. And I, in the suburb, and I started high school. And after that, out of high school, I still hadn't had a drink, and I changed all my ways when I was pregnant. That was the thing that was the change. It was that switch. I stopped drinking. I wasn't drinking at the time. I stopped the drugs. I stopped sneaking out. I became good. I said the rosary, a 54-day novena for my daughter so she'd get good parents. Although I never prayed that she'd get parents like mine. I thought I got good parents, but I think I must have known that they weren't good parents, And so I ended up eventually drinking and using and going down a spiral. And it started after my father passed in 1977. And I just started going to the bar and sleeping with guys and looking for my dad. I was looking for my dad in all the wrong places. And then I met Randy, and I married Randy. We were married 1 month. He told me if I married him, he'd take me to Canada to meet my family, because I found my family in 1980 when I was 22, 23. And that was back in the old days where I wrote letters. I have a binder that's like this big. And back then it was ALMA, Adoptee Liberty Movement Association. And I wrote letters to Pierre Trudeau to try to get my birth certificate. I wrote letters to hospitals. I have so many copies of letters. I had it set up to fax. I had my non-identifying information. I knew that my mother was Irish. My father was French. He worked on the railroad. My mother had 6 brothers and no sisters. She liked to sew her own clothes. She had brown hair and blue eyes. She was 5'5". I'm 5'1 3/4". I had this information, and it's funny because when I was pregnant with Mary Claire, the baby that I relinquished, I had the adoption agency the state adoption agency came to the pregnant school and talked to us. And I went up to the lady afterwards and I said, I'm adopted, and my parents don't know anything about my family because they've never told me they did. And I went home and I told my mom, and she started to cry. I didn't know why she was crying. I asked her a few years ago before she passed away, and she told me, she said, I came to her and I told her about the agency, and she said, I was so sad because I got to love you all those years, and because I loved you, your birth mother, pain. I got the love and she got the pain. She had compassion for my birth mother. And she said, there's some records and your papers with your real name on it in the safety deposit box. So I got to read those when I was pregnant with my daughter, and I thought my mother there with me. And I even wrote in my journal, she has to show me how to do this. She's got to show me the way, because I didn't know how I was going to be able to do this, but she had done it, right? So I now, I have all those papers, and I use those to search. And when I found my biological family, I found my uncle, but my birth mother was deceased, and I never got to meet her. Yeah, she had died of a broken heart. She had tried to get me back. She didn't have a father for me. She grew up in a home with 6 boys, and she was a workhorse. This is what people told me, and she didn't want me to have her life. I would have had to live with my granny and my 6 wild uncles. And she was trying to save me from her life. And then she met a man right away and tried to get me back. They went to the adoption, and I was still in foster care, but they wouldn't give me to her. And so she had another child. She had 3 other kids. And when I met her husband, eventually he told me that she cried every night, pining for me until she died. Oh, brutal stuff. I mean, the things that I learned about her life. And it's so weird because any little tidbit, like, I don't care what it is, tell me about my mom. I don't care if it's bad. I don't care it's like the only way I could know her. And I know she loved me. I know she loved me. And so that was rough. And it was rough writing the manuscript too because of that. But my daughter, when I relinquished her, all I held on to was 18 years. 18 years I can find her. 18 years I can find her. 18 years. And I counted the years. And then when it got to be close to her being 18, I started telling my friends, oh, I'm going to go look for her. I'm going to find her. And they said, but what if she doesn't want to find you? Maybe you should wait and see if she wants to find you first. And I was enraged by that. No, I know she'll be just like me. She'll want to find me. I know she's just like me. I know she's just like me. And so 6 months before she was 18, I couldn't wait. And I called the adoption agency in Anchorage. And they said, it's 6 months too early. Adoptions, they were open up in Alaska by then, believe it or not. This was in 91. And it was one of the states where they had open adoption records. And they said, but write us a letter, we'll forward it to her parents. And then if they want to do a reunification, then we'll facilitate it, but wait till she's 18. So that was 6 months. And I sent the letter. I didn't send the letter, sorry. I couldn't write a letter. I couldn't even write a letter to give her with the nun. I was supposed to be able to do that. But I felt so much shame. And what do you say? I'm sorry, I couldn't keep you. You needed a mommy and a daddy. I didn't want the bunk platitudes I grew up with. And I felt stupid that they would know I couldn't write. And anyway, my insecurity, I never gave her that letter, even though having a letter from my birth mother would have meant more to me than anything on the entire planet, like anything. And so I didn't write the letter, but about a week or 2 later, I get a call at my desk at work, and it's the adoption agency, Catholic Charities in Alaska. And they said, we're sorry we haven't gotten back to you. I'm like, what do you mean? I didn't expect them to get back to me, And they said, but we have a picture here. And I'm like, a picture of who? Of your daughter. And at that moment, all those tears that I had repressed for 18 years came at one time. And I couldn't even hang up the phone. I couldn't find the receiver. There were so many tears. And my coworkers rushed to my cubicle, like, are you okay? Who died? What happened? I couldn't even speak. And the few days later, they sent me a picture of her in the mail.
Wow.
And I kept calling my neighbor, has the mail come? Has the mail come? Has the mail come? And I raced home on my lunch, a late lunch. And I opened that mailbox and I sat on my front porch and I looked at her face for the first time. And it was so weird. It was surreal. It looked like I was looking at somebody I knew. It looked like I was looking at myself. it was so weird. And she walks like me, she talks like me, she looks like me. We're both raised very strict Catholic. We're really not traditional in any way, shape, or form. She's just like me. And they sent her to meet me. So we both had our hair permed because it was in the 80s, right? And we had long permed hair, and we kept our forehead headbands. And I had these really tall forehead. My kids all have this tall forehead, all my offspring. And we got it from my grandfather, who was the alcoholic. My birth mother's father was a drunk. I got the gene. And I'm a lot like the Reed side of the family, not like the Aboriginal. So my biological mother was blonde and blue-eyed, light-haired and blue-eyed. But she was the only kid in the family like that. The rest, she was in a sea of dark heads. She just turned out light like her father, who was Irish, or English and Irish. And her mother was what we call Métis. And Métis is the French term for half-breed. And it was coined by the French, obviously, who mated with the Scots that mated with Aboriginal women. So my grandmother she looked indigenous, and so did my uncles. My mother looked fair. She looked light. My biological father, his name was Chaps. Her name was Ida. And Chaps was an extraordinary handsome man. He looked like Elvis Presley back in the day. And he was dark, very dark skin, as are my siblings on his side of the family. He got my mother pregnant, and then he got his girlfriend pregnant. I was conceived on Halloween. How many people know the day they're conceived? My mother visited him Halloween, he told me. And my birthday is July 27th, which figures out. But she ended up pregnant with my brother, my half brother. And so we were in utero at the same time for like 3 months, just in a different womb. And my dad, when I was born, my granny called my father to come to the hospital to see me. He said to pay the hospital bill. And so he never went, because all they wanted was for him to pay the hospital bill. And so I had a lot of, sadness around that. And I asked him many times, I never said, wasn't I important enough to pay the hospital bill for? But I didn't get the right answer. I didn't get an answer. It was always, circumvented or whatever. And he passed a few years ago. And he was a really nice man. And his wife just passed. And she was very welcoming to me and always kept the channels open, but wasn't a warm woman to me.
So you met your siblings?
Yeah, I met my siblings. I went and I did geographics, which is what we call it. We're an alcoholic. I went to Canada for a while and caused some wreckage up there, and came back down here and eventually got sober. But I partied a lot with my siblings and on my dad's side, and particularly my brother Kane, who we were really close. And he came down here and lived with me for a while, and I went up there and lived, and I stayed with my sister. And, it was really interesting because I grew up where you set the table, I did all the chores. And it wasn't like I was, super, my brother didn't have any chores. So I set the table, I washed the dishes, I dusted, I did all those things. And my brother did pretty much nothing. And then, we had, like things matched. But when I went to Canada, they grew up poor, the Métis, the Aboriginal people. And it was really prejudiced because they weren't white and they weren't native, because they were Métis. So they had relinquished their rights for a little bit of land and a little bit of paper back at my ancestors did. So Métis is now actually a term for almost another race up there. And so
I've heard it. I never knew what it was.
Yeah. So I'm Métis as well. And I did my DNA, and I'm almost a third Aboriginal, but I ended up like my mom. And but my siblings were great, and I felt like when I was at their house, and they peeled a potato with one swoop. I needed a peeler. I went out to buy a peeler just so I could stand at the sink with my siblings and feel like I was part of the stew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I loved that nobody came to my house. You know, nobody wanted to be around my parents. They were not welcoming. It was dark. It was foreboding. They were older. They didn't like people in the house. And I always wanted to have a big family. And I think it was in my blood.
So did you have a big family? I heard you say kids. So I didn't.
Right.
I didn't realize how.
Yeah, I thought there was one. There's more.
Yeah. So yes. So yeah. Did you have kids with Randy?
So that I did with my family, my biological family. My dad had 4 kids, and they didn't have anything that matched. Their silverware didn't match. They put plates on top of for Tupperware on top of their food, and I loved that.
You felt home. You felt at home.
Everything was worn and everything. Yes. And it was both sides of my family. And, you know, the Cree people followed the buffalo, and they were all part of my family, super connected, and they all get together all the time. And so when I had my kids, so I relinquished Mary, and then I got sober, and I met the first sober guy, and I got immediately pregnant. And then he got immediately drunk. And then and I caught him in bed with a blonde and a bottle of Bacardi when I was 5 months pregnant. I climbed in his window and caught him with her. And it's actually a funny story. But anyway, suffice to say, I was a single mom, and I stayed sober, and I kept my daughter, and she's 38 today. And she's the one that wanted me to write my memoir.
Yeah. In Michigan.
Right. No, she lives here.
Oh.
My daughter that I relinquished for adoption, she had moved. Her father was with the Secret Service, and they had been stationed in Alaska. And then they moved to Washington State. And then when she was 13, they moved back to the home of the parents, which is in Michigan. And so that's where she lives with my 2 granddaughters. So she turned 50 in June, and I went back for her birthday and my granddaughter's graduation.
Wow.
That's where you were.
Yeah. She's going to Michigan State. She's super smart. She went to school and everything. Mary's just like me. We're like smart, but entrepreneur.
And that was, you named her what you were named.
I named her Mary Monica after me, thinking she'd be able to find me if I named her the same thing as me.
That's smart. Yeah.
Yeah. But she didn't. All she had to do is call Alaska, and they put us together. So that was really nice.
Alaska, I guess, doesn't have as
they're open. They were
wow.
Open. Yeah, they're one
that's
of
amazing
the states that's open.
Yeah.
And Michigan.
Thank you, Alaska.
Yes.
Michigan's one of the worst.
It's one of the worst. And they knew that. And that's why her mother had a friend that couldn't find. And that's why they started early, because she knew Mary wanted to find. And her mom was amazing. They said they wanted to thank me in person. And they were amazing people. And they're still alive. But it was just the perfect scenario. She got the greatest family, the greatest people. But then I divorced Rebecca's dad, the one that's 38, and because he was not sober. And so I raised Becca on my own, and then I got married again. And I remember this husband, and my picker was broken. Probably still is. He's single now.
My friend Ron and I used to call it that.
that.
My picker isn't working.
Definitely a broken.
I have the same problem.
No, I pick
bad picker.
Yeah, I pick people that betray me, and anyway,
Of course.
I'm now I live with my brother, and he's great brother. He's like so cool. He's clean and sober now 6 years, and
good for
he's
him.
working, and he's like my best friend, and he's
taken on his own things too. I love that.
Yeah. So I
and
in my mom's house. So anyway, I have my son, then I had a son. So I have 3 kids. They're all different fathers. And
no shame in that. It's amazing.
Not to me. I mean, through a lot of shame being knocked up at 15. That was a lot of shame back then, and had to give my baby away. But it's come full circle. And so Mary, when she came to visit me for the first time, they sent her 2 days before her 18th birthday. I have video of us at the airport. It's not on my website. I'm waiting till I launch my book. My book is being launched. The name of it I have. It's Practically Still a Virgin. is the name of the book.
It's great.
We'll put all this in the show notes for
All
people.
the
So yeah,
but
I was going to say it should be, I just like that you need to somehow write a story with 5 months pregnant and bourbon coming through the window, something with that book.
Yeah, I think that's in this book.
You've had some good stuff.
Yeah, it's some good stuff. There's some good stuff in it. Anyway, so I ended up, where was I? So
when you met
her
Mary at the airport.
When I met Mary at the airport, that is not on my website yet. I'm waiting. But I have the interview with my father. So when my father came in 1980 to my house, Alma, the camera crew, so one of the news stations wanted to do a 4-part series on adult adoption. And they knew that I was going to be reunifying with my father. So the camera crew came to the airport and it filmed us meeting in 1980. And then at my home, they came with, the mic'd me up. And I have that. It's very rough, but I have that. And then I have these all documented. So Mary, and she came, we dressed exactly the same. We wore the same clothes, and I had this big party for her of everybody I knew that I told everybody all my life about Mary.
Yeah.
Always talked about her. And I knew she was going to be, and people were just unbelievable. They like, oh my God, they didn't know which of us was which. We looked on my website. You can see one of the pictures. We looked so much alike. We talked alike. We walked alike. We have the same everything. And I wonder if it's because I created her, thoughts are huge things. Yes. And I always said, she's just like me. She's just like me. I know she's just like me, and she's just like me.
So, and do all your kids know each other and have a relationship? And
yeah. So Mary and Becca, my daughter, Becca, who's 38, my golden child, they say, there's some sibling rivalry there with Mary. She's the oldest, yet I got to keep Becca.
Yeah,
and
it's painful. It's painful.
And they're a lot alike, but they love each other. And they, we've gone back there together, we've been together a number of times. And Mary is, when her daughter was born 18 years ago, I went back to be a mom with a newborn, and like a real mom. Like I was so excited,
Yeah.
And Mary treated me like shit the whole time.
Yeah.
Taking the coffee pot, never mind, I'll make the coffee. Just horrible. And I was in the basement where my bedroom was. It was a beautiful room, but I felt like I was shunned to the dungeon. And I'd call my significant other at the time and just cry and cry and cry. And she says it's hormones. I know it's not hormones. And so I just went back there for her 50th birthday, which she didn't celebrate. She's never liked her birthdays. She used to, when she
that's
was
a common adoptee
trait,
right? Not liking your birthday.
Exactly. She would sit by the window waiting for me to come for her and cry. So yeah. So and it's changed when she had her own child, and now she has a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old, and they're beautiful girls. And her husband, she's divorced now, but her husband was an adoptee.
Interesting.
And her current boyfriend is an adoptee.
That's really layered in
we
there.
have so much, and we could just talk forever, and I want to find a way for you to, I know we could.
So basically that's it. I mean, I'm at the end. I could go on for hours, but basically I just got back from Michigan. We didn't celebrate her birthday. I was there for the grad party. And I love her and she loves me, and we FaceTime all the time, and I talk her off a ledge all the time. There's an essay on my website about how she finally named her pain, and that she misses me.
I'm glad that that you have her. I was thinking that while you were speaking, I was thinking how many birth mothers and children that are relinquished that don't have the feelings for this can be like, oh, I can't have relationship, or you thought about her every day, that kind of thing. Because, often we haven't really heard from birth mothers,
Well, yeah, because we're an adoptee centric.
So it's like we have
podcast. So
of course. Yeah. So we have the layered part here as an adoptee and a birth mother. We've had
Yeah. Well, I think for me, being an adoptee and having the adoptee pain, I had to forgive my mom, my adopted mom. I had to forgive my father.
Yeah.
I didn't ever feel like I had to forgive my birth mother for some reason, maybe because I related to her. But how I did that is I had to go back and look at what made them the way they were, what happened in their life. And a lot of what I've done in the last 7 years is investigate my parents' past. And the same with being an adoptee. I believe that healing can come from compassion. Why do birth mothers do what they do?
Yeah.
And so many are shut down, and secondary rejection is just horrific. But these women are broken.
Yeah.
In so many ways. And reading books like The Girls Who Went Away, it's like that, listening to the other side of it can give us some compassion for why people do what they did and why there's secondary rejection. So I'm hoping that's my message.
It's very healing, and you're brave, and you're putting a lot of very deep and personal things out there. And I appreciate it. I think all the listeners will too, because there's so many people who just listen and don't have someone to talk to, and haven't had counseling, and
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. You're very vulnerable and honest and brave to put all this out there. So we really appreciate that. And love having you on.
My pleasure. Absolutely. And I love
you're a light. You're a light.
And Patreon supporters, man, you guys support these.
Thank you for being one.
$5 thing where there's more options, because $5 isn't enough. You guys do some really wonderful work.
Thank you, Monica.
There actually is an option to change that. Yeah.
It was hard.
Oh,
was it hard?
Huh. Good to know. We'll have to look at Patreon and find out.
Will you tell us really quick the name of your book?
Yes, it's Practically Still a Virgin, isn't it?
Oh, right.
I like that title.
Virgin. I do too.
And I haven't launched that. Nobody knows but you. And now everybody listening. So
great. And if you have links, we'll definitely put those on and to your website. We'll link to your website for sure.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah. So great meeting you, Monica. Thank you.
We'll see you in person someday.
Yes, I hope
would like
so.
that. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.